Jim Gordon here in the offices of the Richmond Sentinel. Time for another edition of Richmond Stories. Well, a couple of times a year, our Richmond Stories bring us to City Hall here in Richmond. It's a great pleasure, as always, to sit down with the city's mayor, Mr. Honourable Brodie. Sir, it's a yearly thing with you and I. Thank you for joining us again.
Yes, it's been just over a year and lots has happened, and it's a good time to just take a look back.
Well, what's interesting is when we started these Richmond Stories, and you were there at the beginning, we were doing it, I think the first one with you was in September of 2020 when everything was still a lockdown and we were much further apart. But let's start with something that you and I have discussed before, and I think it's a concern around the kitchen table, around the dining room table, at restaurants, wherever you are with friends and family, and that is community safety. I know that's a growing concern. It tends to lead all the stories on the news. Give us your thoughts on that, sir, because I know Richmond is, I would say from what I see in the news, anecdotally from what I read too, safer than some other communities in its lower mainland.
Well, we think that Richmond is a pretty safe community, but the challenge is always the same. If you are a resident of Richmond and something happens to you, I don't want to hear about your statistics that you're 99% safe. Right. You don't feel safe.
Correct.
And so it's a matter of working on it with every resident, with every service provider that we can, 365 days a year, to make sure that people feel as safe as possible. And of course, there's many ways we do that. Let's
talk about some of those ways. Sure. Every time, as I said, I've talked to you, you've brought up things to reinforce the safety element within this city. I want to talk about this publicly open 10,000 square foot community center that I believe just came to be, I think last month, or
it actually was finished during the COVID time, but in the last year we've been able to open it. This is the City Center Community Police Office. We originally had the RCMP centered in the building right next to City Hall on Minaroo. After the Olympics, we got a new facility on number 5 Road south of Steveston Highway, and we moved the RCMP there. And that worked out very, very well. But one of the weaknesses of that approach is that people who want to go to see the police for routine matters, they have to go that much farther.
Right.
In terms of their response for the RCMP, it's that much farther out of the way. Organization and coordination with the airport aspect of the detachment is that much more difficult. So what we did in a building that originally was a courthouse, right at the corner of Granville and Gilbert, we redeveloped it into a community police office. And in the last year, we were finally able to reopen it.
To break it down for our viewers is and this is certainly good news, that you've welcomed 16 additional police staff, 27 new firefighters. Tell our viewers how important that is. I can imagine the average viewer not being able to put that figure with how does, as you said, 99% of the time you're okay, but how does that affect the city? I mean, it's important to have more police, absolutely, but what does that do for the city?
Well, we got more police and more firefighters. We committed a number of years ago, around 2015, 2016, that within the next number of years, we would increase the complement of RCMP officers by 91 officers. And we would increase the complement for the firefighters to keep up their response capability by 36 officers. So last year was the last part, it was the last tranche of that commitment that we made. So it completed our increase in manpower, person power, officer power, and so we now can go into the future. Doesn't mean that we're never going to have to add another body, but I think with the RCMP, our police to resident ratio was pretty low, and we were basically the lowest in the region. So that brought that right up. And in terms of the firefighters, we hadn't added anybody to the complement for probably about 20 years. So again, as you say, it's a matter of making people feel safe in their own community, having the bodies and the officers required to effectively make a timely response to situations, and it's all part of that commitment. Unfortunately, it costs money,
Sure.
but I think that the people support it.
Let's tell our viewers about, now into its third full year of operation, the Fox Mental Health Car.
Well, prior to, we go back a long time. We know that in the last 20, 30 years, the number of people without homes has increased dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
The street incidents have dramatically increased. And the traditional approach is to simply consider that to be a police incident. In the last number of years, everybody has realized that, yes, it's a police incident, but often there's a component involving mental health, substance abuse, and that sort of thing. And so, following a number of other cities, we have now what's called Fox 80, which is where an RCMP officer, specially trained, will work with a social worker, mental health worker. Mm-hmm. When there seems to be a component involving mental health to respond to, then that car with the two people will respond to it. And that has had a real uptick. The suggestion now is that they should have the same approach, but for the youth. And so it'd be youth and involving mental health and that sort of thing. So it's been a big success.
Because there's so many subjects to cover, you're used to me jumping all over the place in terms of subject matter and what we're going to discuss next. You have been mayor since, am I correct on this, October 2001?
Yes.
That's a long time. You've seen this city grow leaps and bounds. Every time we talk, planning and development infrastructure comes up. Can you talk a bit for our viewers about things that have been going on and plans for the rest of this year and into 2024?
In terms of the projects that we need to move forward on, that sort of thing?
Let's start with that. Yeah.
Well, just to give you the flavor of the situation, one of the big ones would be the Stevenson Community Center. We are committed to rebuilding the community center. If you go by the location on Moncton, you'll see that shovels are now in the ground and they are starting to build. That's a $95 million project, one that is overdue and is going to meet with the approval of people everywhere in Richmond. It'll be very good. Now, in North Richmond, that's where a lot of the redevelopment is happening. So in the Capstan area, there's a couple of facilities there. One is the Capstan Community Center, right on Capstan Way number 3. And we're hoping that this year that we're able to spur that on to completion. And so it'll be there for the people, especially in North Richmond, but people all over the city. And also in the same area, we have the Capstan Canada Line station. Yeah. Now that's an important facility because when we started the redevelopment of the north part of Richmond, of our city center, there wasn't the density that would require a station. Right. But as you're developing thousands and thousands of units in that one area, and so by the time it has been redeveloped, you do need that Capstan station. So a levy has been placed on every unit that is sold in that particular area. And when we had $29 million, that was given to TransLink, and they've started construction. So again, by the end of the year, early 2024, we expect the Capstan Canada Line station to be finished.
Let's talk about something that you and I have discussed, I think, every time I've been with you, and that is always looking to improve the level of options for rental properties. Is that something you're still focused on?
Last year, there were a number of large projects totaling about 2,500 living units that we approved. And about 40% of those living units are for rentals, whether it's at market rates or it could be something below market. And there's a number of different categories below market. But people are talking about how much they need the rental units.
Right.
And so we've made a real focus on that, and going into the future, it continues. So if you want to redevelop some property in the city center, large property, 60 units or more, the developer has to contribute at least 15% for below market rentals and another 15% of market rentals. So that will hopefully bolster the stock of rental properties that are available to people. Now, in return for developing those rental units, then the applicant is able to get a density bonus. So they get more units, which then pay for these rental units.
And do you find too, especially, I mean, I call them kids, but the people in their 20s or 30s, let's say, are you thinking that are you getting toward a better place where this demo will have better options in terms of renting? I mean, buying is tough. I think a lot of the people of that generation aren't looking at that, but they do need rental options. So you see that being a benefit to them?
I do. When we get those rental units, there will be a mixture of studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedrooms. So it's really to cater to all demographics there. But yes, we do believe that the people coming into their careers do need those rental options before. Many people, most people, I guess, it's their objective is to purchase. Right. But in the meantime, then they can rent. So yes, to have the stock available for them is a big bonus.
One of the things I love about the city, and something that was missing when you and I first sat down almost 3 years ago, were events, arts, culture, festivals. They had all, and rightly so, were not present. Things are slowly over the last year since we spoke coming back. Richmond Market's good to see. One of the things that I love about the city is the amount of arts and culture that you have that may not get the attention it deserves. Is that another thing that you and your council are always trying to improve upon?
Every single year we're trying to look at ways where we can gain the interest of the residents of our city and around the region, quite frankly. The most obvious events will be the big ones. July 1st, Canada Day, the Salmon Festival, Maritime Festival. We've had doors open where people go around and see various things in our community, different opportunities. There's a whole range of opportunities where people can enjoy Richmond and all it has to offer. We also are a big contributor to something called Culture Days, where there's a whole range of different opportunities for the residents. So that is an important aspect. All of it is important to us.
How important is it to get out there and compete? And you obviously do it well to get these big events. For example, just recently, something Richmond Sentinel was a part of. I know that you were happy to have them here, was the Cara hockey tournament. How important is it to get as many of those coming, those type of big attended from out of town type events?
I think it's important, and it's important for a number of reasons. If we want to go right to the bottom line, there's an economic benefit to your city. You attract people for varying lengths of time to come into your city, and maybe they rent hotels, they go to your restaurants, they patronize your shops, the malls, all of that. So financially it's important, but probably equally important is the fact that it's interesting and people find they learn about your city, and even when you live in the city, you learn about your city. And you get there's a lot of excitement and a lot of interest that you have created. I think it's an important aspect, and something, after COVID, we wanted to get back to it as soon as possible. During the worst of the COVID times, we were able to have some of the events and the other features virtually. And actually the statistics on people who tuned in was pretty good, but it wasn't the same.
Yeah. Let's talk about the city's resilient economic strategy continued, of course, since we last spoke. Can you talk about post-pandemic growth? I know you're a big proponent of that. I was just looking at saying like the number of new business licenses rose 20% in 2022. That's a good sign.
That, for example, is a good sign that people, who knows whether they shut their business down or they just let their business license lapse, but things are coming back. So we're always searching for new ways to connect with the businesses and with the people. For instance, now you've got an app that allows you to go in, it's called My Business. It allows you to go in and renew your business license. Those are the kinds of things that are becoming more and more prevalent. In our planning process, we're trying to develop better online and virtual ways to continue with the planning process so that you don't, it's just that much more efficient and effective. So yes, coming out of the pandemic, it's certainly been a matter of growth and re-energizing our business and our personal base.
And you have been mayor for over 20 years, so you've seen things in ways that you can communicate with the citizens and people from the outside world. You are very positive and proactive when it comes to social media and everything. How important has that been? Because when you started, there was no such thing. It was, I think the fax machine was still around when you were there. But you've got to keep up, and you obviously have, because you're very proactive, as I mentioned, on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. How important is that?
Well, when I started, probably they didn't have social media.
It did not exist.
It's hard to get a timeline on the thing, but yeah, that has all come on. And in terms of communicating with people, you want to use every weapon that you've got in your arsenal. Social media is accepted by so many people in our community, so it's an opportunity for us to communicate. Tell them what's going on, tell them what has been going on. So Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and so many of the others, they're a vital tool for us. And in the most positive sense, it enables the city to reach out and try and communicate and get the message across to people who maybe they don't read newspapers or they don't hear about it in any other way.
It's interesting because I do see, because you also want the local market as well, and I do see your Richmond commercials a lot on, say, Global and other local networks, so that's great. Boy, there's another subject that we have talked about every time that I've sat with you here in the chamber, climate change. I know that you have talked about things that you're not waiting till things go beyond the stage of being able to correct or at least help. How do you and your council, your team, look at what's been going on the last couple of years? I know last time we were here, you had mentioned a few things that you were doing to improve certain areas of Richmond.
Foremost on our list for analysis and impact is the environment. We have an overall goal under our plan, our environmental plan, that by 2030 we're going to reduce greenhouse gases by 50% compared to 2007, and by 2050 it'll be a neutral situation. There's lots of things that go into that. Two to mention, the biggest one would be district energy, whereas we are developing these big projects in the city center area particularly. A lot of the energy is ground source, but it's all geared towards district energy. So instead of using fossil fuel type of resources, petroleum products and that sort of thing, we are using the natural sources, and they are sustainable and renewable. Right now, we've got about 5 million plus square feet that is on the district energy grid. By 2040, 2050, that will go up tenfold. One of the major things we did this last year, because we worked with a private company called Corix on the district energy, is we got a commitment from the Canada Infrastructure Bank for $175 million at very favorable rates. So our ability to grow in the future is assured. As I say, we're trying to take it up tenfold. We see as the way of the future, and it's an important component of our plan. Buildings and vehicles are the two biggest sources of the greenhouse gases. So the other area, one of the other areas we're concentrating in is on the fleet, on our vehicles. So half the vehicles that we bought last year, or in the last year, were either full electric or hybrid electric. We won awards for that, and again, we see that all as the way of the future to get away from the greenhouse gas emissions and to become more sustainable.
Another issue for citizens in this city, and many cities certainly in this province and around the country and around the world most likely, is childcare. That's a concern for you. For our viewers out there, we again, another subject that we do talk about every time I sit with you. Talk about any updates in that area for our viewers.
If you want the young families to live in your community, they've got to have access to the childcare. Now, there's of course many private childcare providers, but the city has undertaken, as buildings are developed and the city gets amenity space, very often it is used for childcare. So we added 2 childcare centers this last year, and we're just about to open another one. We have in the neighborhood of 600 childcare spaces that are in city-owned facilities. Mm-hmm. Now, private operators, but it's a city space.
Right.
We think that it's part of helping to provide for the young families. Without that, where are the families with young kids to go?
Right.
You know, you've got 1 or 2 parents who are working all the time. They need that childcare. And working with other levels of government, much of it is now that $10 a day. What a difference that makes to the working family, rather than hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per month.
I heard
childcare.
I heard a lot of families exhaling actually when that happens.
Oh, it's unbelievable the difference it makes.
We kind of come to the part toward the end of the interview where I like to kind of put the notes over here and talk about you and things that maybe people don't know about you. For our viewers, what do you do in your spare time? I don't say you have a lot of it because I do see you at a lot of events, which you have to do in your position. You've got to be out there for the citizens to see. But what do you like to do in your spare time?
Well, a lot of my spare time is simply family time, private family time. But like so many people, during the downtime of COVID, it enabled me to kind of expand my reach out into other areas. So now I have my dog and spend a lot of time with my dog. And I used to play tennis, and I had stopped for many years, and I got back into playing tennis. So those are just 2 of the activities that I really enjoy. And it's only because of COVID and the shutdown that enabled me to have the time to think about either one of them.
And after COVID, I never want to say after because it's
still there.
Yeah. Did you find, and again, another duty that's part of what you do was there a lot of going around and talking to businesses to say, not to give them a rah-rah halftime game kind of coach speech, but did you find you had to get out there and tell people we're going to get through this? The government was there, but...
That message was done in a lot of different ways. At the very outset, when everything was shut down, we did a number of videos talking about what is happening, what is being shut down, what's the plan, how are we going to get through this kind of thing. As it went on for a period of time, I found myself more at, I didn't actually go to someone's business, but usually it would be a matter of attending chamber linked events, because they would still have them even if they were online. There would be other business associations, other types of interest groups. And again, it was a matter of, we're going to get through this. This isn't what anyone predicted nor what anyone wants, but we will get to the time when this is a thing of the past. And of course, as the danger subsided, then you could broadcast your message more personally.
You are that rare thing, sir, someone who's been in office for, as I said, I don't say this in a joking manner, but to put it into perspective, you took office about a month after 9/11.
Yeah, it was a month after 9/11.
Yeah. I'm going to put you on the spot with this last question. You have, as I said, been mayor for over 20 years. If you could go back in time, what is one thing you would tell yourself as a new mayor in 2001 in the fall of that year?
When you're a new mayor, the learning curve is really very significant. I had been a councillor for 5 years. So I thought I knew the constituent parts of the job, at least notionally. And when I got into the position, I found that it was very daunting indeed. It took a great deal of focus to get through those early days. I don't think I would have any advice that isn't fairly obvious, but your ability to work with the city comes from your contact with the city. So the people of the city, the residents, the businesses, the various groups. But even if you don't shake every hand in Richmond, to go to events, to be part of what is going on in your community is really the essence of what you're doing. And so you're working with the entire community, you're building some kind of a rapport and some kind of a link, however distant, with all the people, the businesses, and the various constituent parts of the city. So I guess I would just say, sounds pretty obvious, but it's not a task being mayor that you can just sit back and revel in your victory. In some ways, that's the easy part. You have to get out there, get to work with your community. Having said all that, I would think that any new mayor would pretty much understand that too. But I would re-emphasize it.
That's good advice, and we will end it there, sir. We do this every year with the Mayor of Richmond, the Honourable Brodie. He's part of another Richmond Stories. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for coming.
You bet.